5 minutes before the doors to Balmoral's confidential strategy session shut, an unexpected royal order was issued. King Charles didn't just block entry, he named names, drew a line in the sand, and set a precedent no one saw coming. The man at the centre? Prince Andrew's closest advisor. Why now? And what does this reveal about the king's deeper strategy? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The atmosphere at Balmoral was anything but ceremonial. What was meant to be a routine high-level royal strategy session suddenly spiraled into a confrontation that shocked even the most seasoned insiders. At precisely 8:55 a.m., just 5 minutes before the doors closed, a royal aide stormed down the corridor with a sealed order. The content of that order would shake the foundations of trust within the House of Windsor. It was signed by King Charles himself, authorizing the immediate removal of Prince Andrew's top advisor from the premises. No warnings, no explanations, just a direct and deliberate command. For those present, it was clear this wasn't a logistical decision. It was a message. Within moments, Balmoral's internal security protocol, known only as Order 9, was activated. Guards, typically unseen, were redirected with sharp instructions. The advisor, who had reportedly already entered the estate grounds the night before, was intercepted near the eastern drawing room. Conflicting reports say he was quietly escorted out through a side entrance, while others claim he attempted to negotiate his place at the table until a second call from the king ended the debate entirely. One fact, however, was undeniable. His presence was no longer welcome. As royal vehicles repositioned and whispers echoed through the stone halls, the media stationed outside Balmoral were placed under immediate lockdown. No questions were answered, no statements given. Journalists noticed an abrupt shift in tone, a subtle tightening of security, a disappearance of scheduled briefings, a press corps left guessing. It was clear something far more serious than a mere scheduling dispute had occurred. The drama unfolding within those gates was deliberately shielded from public view, but inside, the tensions were reaching a fever pitch. Sources from within the royal household later hinted at the true reason behind the advisor's sudden banishment. Documents allegedly found in his possession were described as too sensitive and not suitable for a non-senior family affiliate. Some even believe these materials contradicted the official agenda of the Balmoral session, raising fears of a parallel strategy forming behind the king's back. It wasn't just the content of the documents that disturbed Charles. It was the implication that Andrew's camp had begun operating with an agenda separate from the crown. Charles's decision was not made lightly. Those close to him say the final call came after days of unease, reports trickling in, and deepening concern that his brother's inner circle posed a threat to the monarchy's fragile unity. The blocked advisor was, in many ways, the lightning rod, a proxy for deeper resentments, unspoken suspicions, and a looming fear that Andrew's return to royal favour was not just premature, it was dangerous. But what made King Charles take such a public and humiliating stance against his own brother's confidant? The answer lies not in what was said, but what was discovered just days before. Whispers from inside the royal document vault speak of a confidential file uncovered just 72 hours ago, one that allegedly connects Andrew's advisor to a secret lobbying effort. And when that file landed on Charles's desk, the course of the monarchy shifted forever. What began as a routine internal audit quickly snowballed into something far more sinister. Triggered by a standard review of outdated records, a junior aide stumbled upon an unindexed file marked with a symbol long retired from modern palace correspondence, an insignia last used during Queen Elizabeth's early reign, reserved only for matters of grave constitutional concern. What this file contained wasn't just unusual, it was incendiary. Inside were transcripts, financial statements, and confidential schedules linking Andrew's advisor to multiple discreet meetings with foreign dignitaries, none of which had ever been logged through official royal channels. It was as if a second shadow court had been operating quietly behind the crown's back. The file was immediately escalated. Within hours, it reached senior aides. By nightfall, it was on King Charles's desk. And when he read the name Operation Revival scrawled across the top of one document, everything changed. The contents hinted at a covert blueprint designed to gradually reintroduce Prince Andrew into public royal life under the radar, leveraging media consultants, charitable appearances, and quiet partnerships with global business leaders. This wasn't just about image repair, it was about resurrection. And it was being carried out without the king's knowledge, but potentially using the crown's resources. Queen Camilla, upon being briefed, reportedly urged caution. Her approach was deliberate, measured, suggesting the matter be handled discreetly through internal review. But Charles had no appetite for subtlety. The betrayal, especially coming so soon after his public attempts to distance the monarchy from scandal, struck a nerve too deep to ignore. He saw it not just as a breach of protocol, but a direct threat to his authority, his reign, and the stability of the institution itself. What made matters even more volatile was the reaction from palace security. Surprisingly, intelligence officers assigned to the royal household recommended that the advisor be allowed to attend the upcoming Balmoral session, believing a face-to-face confrontation might yield more clarity and control. But Charles wouldn't entertain the idea. He overruled the advisors with a swift stroke of his pen, marking the first time in his reign he publicly dismissed the recommendations of his Security Council. To those within his inner circle, it was the clearest sign yet that the king had reached his limit and that his brother's world was about to change drastically. And then came the final, most damning layer of the file, one that has yet to be confirmed but continues to rattle insiders. Several transactions tied to royal-adjacent charities appeared to bear the advisor's signature, funneling funds to consultancy firms with vague missions and no clear oversight. While the full scope remains unclear, the mere suggestion of financial manipulation was enough to trigger alarm. Charles didn't hesitate. The file was sealed, copied, and dispatched to Balmoral under armed escort. The message was clear. The upcoming strategy session would not tolerate divided loyalties, and there would be no place for shadows. With tensions rising and trust unraveling, the king's next move would silence every skeptic and ignite a firestorm behind closed doors. The king didn't act alone. A secret late-night meeting featuring Princess Anne, Prince William, and one unexpected royal ally was where Charles laid out his next move. What happened in that room wasn't just a decision, it was a declaration of war within the House of Windsor. The walls of Windsor have heard countless secrets, but what unfolded that night was unlike anything the monarchy had faced since the abdication crisis. Behind doors locked from the inside and stripped of all staff, King Charles convened a gathering that would define not only his reign but the legacy of the crown. Present were his most trusted lieutenants not just by blood, but by conviction. Princess Anne arrived first, as always sharp, stoic, and straight to the point. She did not mince words. Her message was clear. Andrew's resurgence was not just misguided. It was dangerous. His growing influence, unchecked and quietly emboldened by his advisor, was becoming a liability the monarchy could no longer carry. Prince William, though quieter, brought with him a generational weight. He spoke not just as heir to the throne, but as a father, a husband, and the public's future king. He warned of the irreparable cracks forming in the public's perception. To him, the advisor wasn't simply a man with a portfolio, he was a symbol of regression, of the monarchy slipping backward when it needed to charge forward. William's words hit hard, not because they were loud, but because they echoed the silent fear many had refused to voice. Then came the surprise, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Her presence was unexpected, her voice quiet but devastatingly effective. She carried with her documents, notes, and whispered confirmations from palace staff. Intelligence had been gathered discreetly, pointing toward a subtle but deliberate effort to rebrand Prince Andrew under the radar. Fundraising dinners disguised as private gatherings, conversations with international lobbyists posing as advisors, and rumors of a secret press deal forming beneath the palace's radar. Sophie, having long held a unique vantage point within the royal corridors, laid it all bare. And as her voice faltered ever so slightly, Anne placed her hand over hers, a rare moment of emotion in a night drenched in cold calculation. The conclusion was inevitable. The decision wasn't just about removing a man from a meeting, it was about defining who the monarchy would be loyal to. Not blood, not ego. The crown. A new principle was quietly etched into the foundations of royal policy that night. Loyalty to the firm must outweigh familial allegiance. It was a principle that would haunt some and empower others, but it was now immovable. And beneath the surface, another idea began to form, whispers of succession responsibilities being quietly reshaped. Not by force, not by declaration, but by strategy, patience, and influence. The advisor's removal was merely the first domino. Those in the room knew it, and as the meeting ended, Charles gave one final look to his sister and his son, not seeking approval, but signaling resolve. The war for the future of the monarchy had begun. But Andrew wasn't about to take this betrayal lying down, and his response, swift, emotional, and quietly explosive, would soon rattle the palace halls. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Prince Andrew made a call. Not to the king, but to someone outside the family, someone with power. What followed wasn't just desperation, it was a veiled threat, hinting at secrets too dark for daylight. In the dead of night, when the corridors of Windsor lay in silence and Balmoral's gates were under tightened surveillance, Andrew's voice cut through the stillness with urgency. The call, now traced to a former legal counsel linked to earlier royal controversies, sent ripples through the palace's carefully monitored communication web. What Andrew said during those few minutes remains undocumented, but what came afterward left little to interpretation. An indirect message was passed to senior aides. If his advisor remained shut out, then the silence surrounding certain buried truths would not last. It wasn't framed as blackmail, but it didn't need to be. The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Word of this reached Charles, not through official channels but via a leak. Not long after the call, palace insiders claim a well-known tabloid editor received a message suggesting a senior royal's confidant was being unfairly targeted. That same editor had once been party to a suppression deal during the height of Andrew's public fallout. The sudden reactivation of that relationship set off alarms among royal communications staff, sparking fears that Andrew wasn't retreating, he was mobilizing. By dawn, whispers of an unsanctioned press appearance began circulating. One source claimed Andrew had been in touch with an independent journalist offering an exclusive, one that could dismantle the palace narrative if his position wasn't reconsidered. Queen Camilla, ever the strategist behind the throne, reportedly urged Charles to de-escalate. She knew the dangers of letting family wars spill into the press. Her argument was simple. Silence Andrew with inclusion, not confrontation. Give him a seat, even symbolically, and extract the threat at its root. But Charles refused. The decision was not based on pride but principle. He would not be held hostage by the past. Not again. He had watched the institution nearly fracture under the weight of compromise, and now he would let the chips fall where they must. It was a gamble, yes, but one he was finally willing to make. Yet in the midst of this crisis, an unlikely figure emerged, one of Queen Elizabeth's longtime aides, now quietly retired, caught between two loyalties. This staffer, having witnessed decades of royal secrets, reportedly leaked fragments of internal conversations to a trusted royal correspondent. The messages were cryptic but enough to hint that the monarchy was bracing for a possible detonation from within, not because of Andrew's words but because of what he knew. And now that knowledge had become weaponized, the game had changed. And as the morning light broke over Balmoral, one room remained heavily guarded. The war room, where the future of the monarchy was now being redrawn. While all eyes were on the men, Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat quietly at the centre of it all. Sources say she arrived early, entered unannounced, and walked out with more influence than ever before. What role did she really play in the Balmoral purge? Her arrival wasn't listed on the official schedule. No press briefing acknowledged her presence, and yet, by the end of the day, her voice had echoed through the strategy room with more weight than anyone anticipated. Catherine wasn't there to observe, she was there to steer. Behind her composed expression and quiet grace, Insiders now say she came armed with a vision that would reset the course of the monarchy itself. For months, her team had been working on what they called the modern monarchy model, a proposal aimed not just at smoothing the edges of royal perception, but transforming the very structure of how the firm presents itself to the public. And Balmoral, with its historical weight and family symbolism, became the battleground where this vision took shape. Unlike the storm brewing around Prince Andrew's advisor, Catherine's approach was measured. She didn't need a microphone or a raised voice. She used strategy, not spectacle. Her team's presentation focused on restoring the monarchy's connection with younger generations, cutting through the noise of legacy scandals, and, most controversially, detaching the institution from affiliations deemed out of sync with modern values. These weren't just policy tweaks, these were surgical cuts, and at least two of them directly aligned with the quiet removal of Andrew's inner circle. One insider said Catherine framed it as a matter of institutional hygiene. If it doesn't build public trust, it doesn't belong inside the house. Her demeanor stood in stark contrast to King Charles, whose fury had by then become increasingly difficult to mask. Where he operated from a place of justified outrage and generational betrayal, Catherine's tone was almost surgical. No drama, no emotion, just a plan. And perhaps that's what made her message even more powerful. She didn't call for the advisor's removal in so many words, but she made it clear that the current structure, if not overhauled, would collapse under its own contradictions. And when Charles looked to her for a closing opinion, she said only one word: unavoidable. That word, now repeated in hushed circles across palace walls, became the quiet sword that cut deeper than any official statement. It solidified her alignment with William, but also placed her squarely in the center of Charles's new power axis, and the implications were massive. No longer just the future queen consort, Catherine had become something more dangerous, an architect, someone who understood that influence in the monarchy isn't claimed through loud declarations, but by knowing exactly when to say the one word that changes everything. Her exit from the strategy room was as silent as her entrance, but by then, the damage, or the progress, depending on where one stands, had already been done. The royal family had heard her, and whether they agreed or not, they knew the crown had just begun its slow but deliberate pivot toward her vision. She didn't need to win the room she already had. But just as the monarchy began to pivot toward a more strategic future, another ghost from the past emerged, ready to burn it all down. What if the blocked advisor wasn't just a strategist, but a keeper of secrets? Rumors suggest a dossier tied to the Epstein scandal resurfaced, with names and dates that made even Charles flinch. And now, the past refuses to stay buried. The walls of Balmoral have seen their share of royal reckonings, but none quite like this. What was originally framed as a tactical decision, the removal of an advisor perceived to be a distraction, was now being reinterpreted through a much darker lens. According to palace insiders, the advisor in question wasn't merely orchestrating Andrew's re-emergence. He was the quiet gatekeeper to decades of information, including confidential records from the most infamous scandal to ever stain the crown's fabric. These weren't just personal embarrassments, they were legal landmines, potentially implicating more than just Andrew, and reawakening questions that the monarchy had worked tirelessly to bury. Renewed investigations abroad, combined with anonymous tip-offs from whistleblowers, had begun drawing fresh attention to old alliances. And just days before Balmoral, a classified intelligence memo reportedly reached MI5, linking the advisor to confidential legal settlements, ones that had, until now, escaped public scrutiny. He may not have signed the documents himself, but his fingerprints were everywhere, acting as the liaison between royal representatives and legal intermediaries tasked with shutting doors before they opened too wide. It wasn't just his proximity to Prince Andrew that alarmed the palace. It was his knowledge, his memory, and the fact that, should he ever be pushed too far, he could detonate truths the monarchy was not prepared to face. Sources claim that the true turning point came when MI5 flagged concerns of reputational fallout should the advisor be allowed to enter Balmoral. Their report, though brief, was said to contain one sentence that stopped Charles mid-breath. This individual is considered high risk for uncontrolled disclosure under pressure. Those words weren't just advisory, they were a red flag painted in bold. It explained Charles's swift and public move to bar him from the session. It wasn't personal anymore, it was survival. The energy inside the meeting shifted the moment whispers of the dossier's contents began to circulate among the inner circle. Attendees grew silent. Glances became sharper. The mood turned brittle. Even those previously on the fence about the advisor's removal now stood frozen by the sheer weight of what was at stake. For Charles, the threat wasn't merely what might be said in public, it was how close the scandal could again reach the heart of the monarchy. And if this advisor truly did hold a key to that dark archive, then silence was not just preferable, it was necessary. The Queen consort, Camilla, was reportedly seen leaving the session early. No official reason was given, but a close aide hinted that she had been visibly shaken, whispering only, "It's starting again." That simple phrase sent chills through those who heard it, because if the past was indeed starting again, it wasn't returning quietly. It was clawing its way through the corridors of power, demanding to be heard. As Charles tightened his grip and Andrew scrambled for allies, the monarchy braced itself for the next rupture, one that would pit family against legacy. He didn't raise his voice, but his words cut deeper than any royal decree. Prince William, often the silent sentinel, finally stood up and stared down his uncle. What he said behind closed doors shocked even Charles and left Andrew no room to move. It wasn't fury that filled the room when William rose. It was finality. After days of tension, whispers, and relentless fallout from the advisor's exclusion, the heir to the throne delivered a message not just to Prince Andrew, but to every royal watching from the sidelines. He began with restraint, as always. Entitlement does not equal purpose. He wasn't just speaking to Andrew's role in the family, he was questioning the very identity Andrew had built for himself over decades. William's statement landed like a thunderclap. In that moment, a generational shift played out not with ceremony, but with confrontation. William accused Andrew's advisor of acting beyond his remit, labeling the backdoor maneuvering and secret meetings as a breach of national and family trust. He pointed to the consequences that had already begun unraveling the resurgence of scandals once buried, the reputational toll, the rift it had deepened between branches of the family tree. But beneath his composed delivery, there was something else simmering: disgust. A deep, personal frustration that what his generation had been trying to build, transparency, accountability, relevance, was being undercut by those too blind to see the damage they'd done. And then, with quiet conviction, William delivered the sentence that left the room breathless: "The next throne will not forget this moment." It wasn't a threat, it was a warning from a future king who would carry the memory of this betrayal like a mark carved into stone. Charles, seated just feet away, remained silent. For once, the monarch chose not to interrupt, not to mediate. He knew William wasn't just confronting Andrew, he was protecting the crown. Catherine, who had watched the entire exchange from the corner of the room, reportedly gave William a subtle nod of support when their eyes met. Her silence wasn't absence, it was alignment. Together, they represented a new era. And that era had no place for shadows pretending to serve the light. Prince Andrew didn't respond. Not directly. He didn't yell, didn't deny, didn't defend. But his face, tightened with rage and humiliation, told everyone in the room that the fracture was now permanent. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked out without a word, refusing even to acknowledge the press stationed beyond the doors. It was a rare moment of defeat for a man who had long relied on silence to outlast storms. This time, the silence was heavier. It was the sound of exile. But even with Andrew cornered and his advisor exiled, the king knew the threat wasn't over. Because some wars are fought not in meetings but in wills. Buried deep within a legal appendix to Queen Elizabeth II's personal Balmoral codicil lies a clause few knew existed until now. A clause that, once triggered, places a moral obligation on the monarch to act in defense of the crown's untarnished future. Did Charles use this ancient provision to justify his brother's humiliation? The clause was a relic written decades ago and hidden within pages of ceremonial language and historical tradition. But its power was anything but symbolic. Known only to a select few within the royal legal circle, the provision grants the reigning monarch extraordinary authority to override existing council and advisory positions when a matter is deemed a threat to the monarchy's moral or reputational integrity. It is, in essence, a last resort, safeguard trigger for royal absolution under crisis, and what makes it more chilling is that it has only been invoked once in modern royal history, in 1936, during the abdication of King Edward VIII. Now, in a moment that history may look back on as a turning point, Charles reached for that same sword. 24 hours before the Balmoral strategy meeting, legal counsel reportedly delivered the justification package to the king, stamped with the formal seal of invocation. The clause's wording, though archaic, was blunt in its intent. The monarch must preserve the crown against internal compromise, even at the cost of familial bonds. It gave Charles the power to bypass recommendations, silence dissenting voices, and act decisively against any individual royal or not who endangered the monarchy's forward path. And with that stroke, Prince Andrew's advisor had no more ground to stand on. The gravity of the moment was not lost on the inner circle. Princess Anne and Prince Edward were both asked to sign witness acknowledgements documents, confirming the extraordinary invocation and providing support for the king's position should any internal dispute arise. Both complied, though not without visible strain. For Anne, it was another act of defense for the institution she has long fought to preserve. For Edward, it was a quiet reckoning, knowing that blood alone would no longer protect Andrew's orbit from consequences. The legal team ensured that the advisor's removal would be airtight. There would be no appeal, no review, no recourse within the royal system. It wasn't just an exclusion, it was an erasure. His access revoked, clearance stripped, and any official affiliation dissolved. The move was executed with clinical precision, but beneath that legality was a storm of buried grief and conflicted duty. Charles hadn't just turned a page in the royal handbook, he'd burned it. And yet, as thorough as the move was, the palace couldn't escape the deeper truth. This clause, once awakened, could never return to slumber. It now stood as a silent reminder that even the oldest ties can be severed in defense of a legacy, that no one, not even a brother, was immune from the crown's harsher judgments. But even legal walls can't contain royal rage. And now, with allies dwindling and desperation mounting, Andrew turns to the last card in his deck. Cornered, humiliated, and stripped of influence, Prince Andrew has issued what sources are calling an exile threat, suggesting he may flee royal life altogether and release what he claims are damning truths. Will Charles bend, or let the crown absorb the coming storm? The letter was brief, but its meaning was unmistakable. Circulated privately among royal aides, it bore Andrew's seal and tone of finality. In it, he suggested a full and permanent withdrawal from all royal engagements, patronages, and appearances. But the message didn't end with retreat, it came with a warning. If his name continued to be dragged through the mud, if his narrative was erased entirely, then he would write his own version of history. And this time, he promised, the public would hear everything. What everything meant remains the subject of fevered speculation. But insiders fear it includes unreleased documents, behind-the-scenes recordings, and personal accounts of the inner workings of the monarchy, accounts that could stain more than just his own legacy. What made this threat different was its reach. Traces of communication between Andrew's private team and foreign media outlets have reportedly been intercepted. One outlet, based overseas and infamous for printing what the British press wouldn't touch, is believed to be actively negotiating terms. This was not mere posturing, it was the prelude to a rupture, and the possibility of a memoir, his own unfiltered version of events, loomed like a sword over the palace. While the royal family has endured books before, never had the potential author been a disgraced prince with nothing left to lose. Camilla, once again the voice of caution, advised Charles to offer Andrew a controlled path. Let him bow out gracefully. Give him space, a stipend, and silence. But Charles, still seething from the betrayal, refused. He saw it not as a negotiation, but as blackmail, and he would not reward threats, especially when the crown had just survived its latest internal siege. His decision widened the chasm within the family. Sibling tensions, already strained, reached a new breaking point. Anne reportedly avoided Andrew entirely. Edward refused to comment. William remained firm, unyielding in his stance that appeasement would undo everything they had just endured. As word of the looming fallout trickled into the press, reporters began circling Balmoral like vultures sensing death. Headlines hinted at a royal reckoning. Columnists speculated whether the monarchy could survive another scandal, this time from within. Palace aides scrambled to prepare counter-narratives, but there was no spinning this. Not anymore. The monarchy stands on a blade's edge, its future weighed not by tradition, but by the choices made behind Balmoral's locked doors. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.